Earlier this month, I shared a video on how to isolate the cause of a parasitic drain with an emphasis on a drain that might be intermittent. And it combined two very popular tests, the use of a low amp probe or clamp and the voltage drop testing method across the fuses. Now, either one is really not sufficient by itself, as I demonstrated in the video. You have to make sure that you're performing that voltage drop test at the time the draw is occurring, hence the use of the low amp probe or clamp. Now, I chose to use a scope in that particular video because it allowed me to let the scope watch the circuit and wait for the intermittent rather than me having to stand over the clamp and waiting for it to show something. But either way will work for you. Now, in that video, I took you through the steps up to identifying the fuse that was protecting the circuit or circuits where that drain was occurring. But some of you asked me to take it a step further, like, Pete, how do you narrow it down to the exact circuit that you have to troubleshoot? So that's going to be the topic for today. I can't stress enough that you can probably find the problem 90% of the time if you take the time to do your homework first. You know, my father taught me a long time ago. He's a master carpenter. I used to pound a few nails with him when I was a kid. But he used to teach me a long time ago that, you know, when you build a house, you first have to build the house. And what he meant by that was you had to draw out the plans. You had to know what it was going to look like. You had to know where the walls were going to be, how big it was going to be, where the septic and the wiring and all of that was going to be before you even broke ground. This is really about the same thing. We want to go ahead and build that situation in our minds and with some research before we even start poking around the car. Doing so will save you a lot of time. You should be able to narrow down exactly what circuits you want to take a look at using this approach. So I guess that's where we're going to start. For a little bit here, I'm going to kind of let you go over my shoulder, and I'll walk you through the process that I would use on the car that we were using in our test earlier this month. All right, so what do you say? Let's get started. A few other pre-testing tips that I want to make sure I leave with you. They just popped into my head. I don't want to forget them. Number one, when you're looking for a parasitic draw, do everything you can to avoid interrupting any of the circuits. And what I mean by that, don't go immediately to pulling fuses, relays, disconnecting the connectors. That shouldn't be your first step, because if you do that and then reconnect, you could be actually resetting the problem, especially if it's a module that won't go to sleep, and then you won't be able to find it at all. You're going to have to wait for it to fail again. The other thing that you want to make sure you do is prepare the car for testing, as I showed in that first video. You want the car to go to sleep, and the only way you're going to be able to do that and still have access to what you need to access in the vehicle is to trick it into thinking that the hood is closed, the door is closed, maybe even the trunk is closed before you proceed. And if there's a smart key involved, make sure that smart key is well away from the vehicle so it doesn't keep a module away. Okay, let's start by referring back to the video. I'm going to try to make sure my hands are out of the way as much as possible so that you can see what I'm doing. But if you recall, back in that video, we actually got a reading of about half a millivolt, 0.50 millivolts across one of the fuses. So for the purpose of this approach, this process, we're going to use the ECU-B fuse as the fuse that I measured that millivolts across. And to start off with, if you don't have an ammeter and you measure voltage, millivoltage across a fuse, you can use a chart like this one. This is actually from the folks who make the power probe. You can find it on their website to get an idea of just how much current that millivoltage reading is the equivalent of. So in this case, we had a mini fuse. So we're just going to go open this up to the mini fuse section. And it's all different depending on the type of fuse. So we're going to go to the mini fuse section here. And it was a 10 amp fuse, so that's right here. And it was half a millivolt, so we're going to highlight that. And then where the two meet is the equivalent current flow. So in this case, it's 67 milliamps. Now that's a little bit more than what you would expect as the norm, but I do want to stress here too that typically, just like with voltage drop, we're not going to worry about a few tenths either way. Typically the problem is going to be apparent. You're going to know that there's a problem there. But in either case, we're going to use this as our example so that you can follow along in the process. And you can apply this process no matter what fuse it was or what circuits are included. You can use this process to help you isolate where the actual problem lies. So we identified that. So let's go take a look first at the fuse. Now, I know this is kind of blurry, but here's ECU-B fuse right there. And this is the underhood or engine compartment fuse and relay junction block. So now that we've identified the fuse, now the first thing I want to do is what circuit or circuits is this going to be protecting? You know, how many of these do I have to go through to find the problem? And that's why I'm picking this fuse, is because I'm going to show you this particular fuse covers a lot. Here's the fuse, and it covers everything from ABS all the way down to the wireless door lock and TPMS. All of these circuits that you see here, all of these circuits are tied back to this fuse some kind of way. Now, that's a lot. If I recall properly, there's 17 different circuits that this fuse is connected to. So that's 17 different possibilities that could be the cause of my parasitic draw. Now, we're going to go through these because what I want to look for now is what are the commonalities? Are all 17 of these different, or are there some commonalities that's going to help me narrow down my troubleshooting when I actually get to the car? So let's take a look at that next. And we might want to come back to that, but now I'm going to show this real quickly because this is another place you can find out what your fuse is protecting. The power distribution diagram. And here's the ECU-B fuse, and again here's a listing of all the circuits. But that's as far as this goes. It doesn't tell me what in those circuits it's going to, it just tells me the same information I just got. So based on your service information system, you can look at both to get a feel for what you're having to troubleshoot, if that makes sense to you. This is just another way of doing that. But we're going to take a look at some of the individual circuits now and get a feel for just where they go and what the commonalities are. We'll start with the analog brakes. Here's the ECU-B fuse. We can follow that over here to the instrument panel junction block. It's coming in on B26, I believe, and it's leaving on, see if I can see that, C15. Okay, we're going to follow that down, see where it's going. And it's coming here to the steering angle sensor. Let me make sure you can see that. Just bear with me for a minute. Yeah, we'll move that up just a tad. So it's coming down here to the steering angle sensor. So that's one. But I also want to note two. It's coming in on pin B26 on the instrument panel junction block. And again, I have to kind of look a little closer. Forgive me, my eyes aren't what they used to be. I'm going to grab my little magnifying glass here so I'll make sure I can tell you the right thing. And C33. All right, so it's C33. I'm just going to make a note of that. C33 over here, B26 over here, and then the steering wheel angle sensor here coming in on pin, so what is that? Pin, it's like pin 8. Pin 8 it looks like. All right, so that's the steering angle sensor. I'm going to set this off for a moment to its own pile. All right, we'll just leave it that way. Okay, the next one up on the list is the instrument cluster. All right, so we don't see anything there on the first page. Let's check the second page. And again, let's see if we can find ECU-B. There's ECU-B right there. And it's coming over again to the instrument panel junction block. It's spliced into this white wire, C15. Okay, that's going back to the other page of the diagram, so we need to back up a step. That's at page 23. Number 3. Okay, and that's coming to the combination meter assembly. So that's coming into the pin 5 on the instrument panel, the instrument panel assembly, the combination meter assembly. And let's see, we're in B26. Well, that was the same we were in before, but now this one is C15. And it's also coming over here to pin 30, and that is the main body ECU. That's the body control module, the multiplex ECU. It has a couple of different names. That's on pin 30 there. So again, this is this is different than what we saw on the brakes. So I'm going to kind of set this off in a separate pile for now. Okay, next thing we're going to look at is the power door lock meter, power door lock circuit rather, excuse me. And here we go again. Here's ECU 8, B rather, coming back in again on pin 30. Now it's coming out on a pink one on A2. So that's still B26 coming in, but now it's coming out on A2, and that's coming down to our door control receiver. So we'll kind of highlight that. It's still entering the multiplex module on pin 30, just like we did earlier. So the only thing different between this one so far is now we have the A2 reference. So I'm going to kind of set that off in a third pile. All right, now we're going to look at the alarm, if you want to call it that, forced entry circuit. Here's the fuse, ECU 8. Again, follow that down. In, again, same 2 on A2. Going to the same place, door receiver. Going to the same place here to the multiplex ECU. So we're going to put that in the pile with the door locks. Electronic power steering was another one on the list. Let's see what's going on with that one. And let's see, here's ECU V fuse way over here. Okay, we see that it's internally connected inside that instrument panel junction block. Coming off with 2 wires. Let's take this one first. That's a white one, sounds familiar, and sure enough, that's coming in at C5 on the combi meter. We know about that one. And it's also going out here on piece, can't quite make that out. Let's see what that says. Oh, that's another C33. Do you remember where that one went? Because we've seen that one before. Is that going to the same place? Yep. It's going to the steering sensor. All right, so let's see, that was the C33 and the C15. It can go in either pile. Let's just put it in the C15 pile. All right, next one, headlight circuits without daytime running lights. Let's find the fuse. Oh, here we are way over here. Follow that down. Again, it's going into a connector. Connects to the white wire. Okay, again, that's C15, B26. Comes back to the combination meter. Out on C15. So we'll put that in the C15 pile. Do you see how these commonalities are starting to build up? So far we have only 3 different ones identified, 3 different possibilities. All right, here we go again. Now we're on the interior lights. Okay, back into the instrument panel junction block, up into the ECU. All right, that's again on P26, but now this is going only to the multiplex control unit. Right, let's see, main body ECU and the instrument panel junction block. So that's kind of unique in itself. Let's make the fourth pile out of that one. All right, instrument illumination, ECUB. We're going to follow that around to, again, the multiplex or main body ECU. That's the only place that goes. We'll put that with the other main body ECU diagram. Warning systems. First one's key reminder, seatbelt warning. Here's the fuse. We're going to follow that over into the instrument panel junction block, and now it's coming out. Again, here's another C15 on the white wire. Guess where it's going? Should know by now. The C15 is going to the combination meter assembly, so we got that one right there. TPMS, ECUB fuse. Again, you see the commonalities. Here's the white wire again on C15 going to the combination meter assembly. So that's another possibility. I guess you can see so far that we've got really 4 different possibilities here. We've got the wire from the ECUB fuse is coming in on to the B26 connection in the instrument panel junction block. So I want to know more about that. And the other thing I want to know is it's coming out on a few different connector pins. A C15 we've identified. We know it's going to the main body ECU on pin 30. We know it's on C33. We found that in the ABS. And we also found, let's see what that one was over there, A2 on the forced entry circuit. So that's 4 different pins and 1, 2, at least 3 different connectors, the B connector, the C connector, and the A connector. So these are the commonalities. We've taken that list of 17, and we've narrowed it down to 4. All right? With me so far. And I'm going to point out here too, if you have any questions about following what I'm doing, then don't hesitate to put something in the comment section or drop me an email or whatever you want to do so that we can help you clear this up. All right, so I'm not really going to need these for the time being, so we're going to take all these individual circuit diagrams and we're going to set those off to the side. Again, why? Because I've identified the commonalities. Right now, I have the ECUB supplying power to the B26 pin on the instrument panel junction block, and then somehow from there it's going to pin 30 on the main body ECU, the multiplex ECU, the body control module for simplicity, and we have it going from C15 to the instrument panel, the combination meter, and we also have one running to the steering wheel speed sensor. So I hope that wasn't too quick for you. Again, I want to stress that I had to look through a lot of information to narrow it down to the individual pages that I'm sharing with you here. To backtrack, just to kind of recap to where we are so far, we identified that fuse ECU-B in the underhood junction block was the fuse that was showing the presence of voltage drop, indicating that current was flowing through that fuse. And we then used our service information system. In this case, we looked at the fuse box legend, and identified the circuits that fuse was protecting. And from there, we looked up all the individual diagrams for all those individual circuits so that we could see exactly where ECUB was going and what the commonalities were. This is a key point. And we took 17 different circuits and we narrowed them down to 4 outputs from the junction block. Okay, now we can narrow it down even further from there. What would be the next step that I would take? In this particular case, your testing methods are going to be based on where your search has led you to this point. In this case, I have to isolate 4 different lines of 4 different circuits to see which one I need to home in on. Now, in this case, I would take my low amp probe, still connected to my scope, and I would first place it around the B26 pin, the 2B26 pin, the black wire leading into the junction block. And I would see make sure that I still have current flow indicated. And if I do, I'm going to test those 4 wires individually to see which one has current flowing out. Now, whatever one that is, I can follow it down to the component that it's connected to see which one is bad. I can simply unplug the component and see if it goes away. I guess another point I really want to stress here, if you noticed while we were looking at these diagrams, there were no no control devices in the positive side of these circuits. What I mean by that, there were no relays, no switches, anything like this in that circuit, because we could have an instance where a relay is stuck closed or a switch is stuck closed, and that's causing the draw. But in this case, all the leads from B26 eventually led straight to a component, the load, the component doing the work. So the switching to ground had to occur internally in those components, so I'm not worried about that. So I know that if I find a current draw, it's going to be related to the component. Finally, I want to take and show you that if there's no draw on any of those, there is one circuit that we aren't able to test by using that method. So this would be a process of elimination. If none of those wires showed any current flow, well, there's only one thing left. That's the main body ECU, the body control module. Why? Because the connection between B26 and pin 30 on the control module is internal to the instrument panel junction block. It's actually mounted on the back side of the junction block, and the pins connect directly to the back side of the junction block. I think I have an image of that. Let me just see if I can show that to you. Yeah, again, you can probably see here, these are the connectors you can see in the photo that I shared. We're going to be looking mainly at 2B, 2C, and 2A over here for those measurements I just discussed. But then here on the back side of the junction block, you can see this is the pins 1 through 32 that were in that shaded section of the schematic we looked at. This is all located on the back of the junction block. I can't get in between it and the ECU. So I hope that clarifies my process for narrowing down the cause. I hope this answers the questions that you've posed. If not, please leave them in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer them for you. I guess one more thing I want to say before we go. Again, it's all about taking the time to understand what it is that you're troubleshooting, the system, the component, the schematic, whatever that might be. Investing the time up front to do your research, so when you do finally go to the car, you'll only need to make a few pinpoint tests to narrow it down. So until next time, thank you very much, and thanks for watching.